Live from New Delhi, you're watching DD India News Hour, India's voice to the world. I'm Preeti Kaur. Coming up in the next 1 hour, Ukraine President Zelensky agrees to implement a halt on energy infrastructure attacks, but vows to attack if Moscow violates the terms of the ceasefire. Israel extends ground operations in Gaza after deadly airstrikes. US says bridge proposal on the table to extend the ceasefire and release of hostages. A legal standoff continues in the US as White House vows to continue its mass deportation of undocumented migrants while judge warns of consequences. Turkey detains Mayor and President Erdogan's main election rival over graft and terrorism allegations, sparking protests. Fed holds interest rates steady as it waits for Trump economic policy to take hold, sees slower growth, expects 2 cuts coming this year. A critical phone call took place between US President Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, marking the first conversation since their tense exchange in the Oval Office last month. The two leaders discussed several key issues, including a potential ceasefire with Russia, military support for Ukraine, and future cooperation on nuclear energy. The call comes amid ongoing violence and military operations in Ukraine. DD India's Aarti Rana gets us more.
White House said Presidents Trump and Zelensky had a fantastic phone call toward ending Russia-Ukraine conflict. The conversation was a positive step forward after a tense exchange earlier this year.
President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems, and President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire.
One of the most significant developments from the call was the discussion of a potential ceasefire, but Ukraine claims that Russia is still unwilling to commit to peace. Future cooperation, particularly in regard to Ukraine's energy infrastructure, was also discussed.
There was a question about the nuclear power plant. There was no question about the network of nuclear power plants. The question was exclusively about the plant that is under temporary occupation. It's in danger because Russia is dominating it with weapons, and it's not working because Russia has absolutely illegally held it and occupied it.
As agreed in a call between Trump and Putin, Russia and Ukraine engaged in a prisoner exchange, with 175 troops released by each side. This exchange also included 22 additional wounded Ukrainian soldiers freed by Moscow as a goodwill gesture. Meanwhile, European leaders have expressed concerns about Trump's approach to the conflict, but Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban believes that EU must back Trump to get a peace deal. The focus now firmly shifts to Jeddah, where a new round of talks between Russian and US officials is scheduled to take place this Sunday. The talks will aim to work out the technical details of a permanent ceasefire. Aarti Rana's report for DD India.
The European Council Summit will convene on Thursday in Brussels. Heads of state and government of 27 member states, as well as EU Council President Antonio Costa, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and the bloc's foreign policy chief Kaja Kallas will participate in the summit. Several critical topics reflecting current geopolitical and economic priorities are expected to be discussed during the two-day summit. The agenda includes discussions on the ongoing conflict in Ukraine, with particular focus on the bloc's continued support for Ukraine, especially amid heightened tensions and the need for security guarantees. The summit comes after a busy period of diplomacy, with the EU leaders aiming to respond to shifting transatlantic dynamics and regional challenges. European defense will also be a key point, with leaders likely to explore ways to boost capabilities and address funding, possibly in the light of a forthcoming EU white paper on defense. The Israeli military has resumed ground operations in the central and southern Gaza Strip, and its operations extended Israel's control over Netzarim corridor, which bisects Gaza. The Israeli military operations were focused on maneuvering aimed at creating a partial buffer zone between the north and the south of the enclave. The renewed ground operations came a day after more than 400 Palestinians were killed in airstrikes in one of the deadliest episodes since the beginning of the conflict in October 2023, shattering a ceasefire that has largely held since January. The U.S. State Department blamed Hamas for the resumption of hostilities and said that there was still a U.S.-crafted bridge proposal on the table to extend the ceasefire and bring about the release of hostages held by the group in Gaza. The renewed violence was condemned by some Western nations, including France and Germany, as well as Qatar and Egypt, which had been acting as mediators in the ceasefire negotiations. French President Emmanuel Macron spoke with Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, and both the leaders condemned the resumption of Israeli strikes on Gaza. Macron said that they will co-chair a conference on a two-state solution aimed at helping revive a political perspective for both Israelis and Palestinians. Macron also said that he welcomed the Crown Prince's Jeddah initiative, which enabled the start of peace negotiations in Ukraine. The White House said on Wednesday that it expects to continue its mass deportation of undocumented migrants and fight unfavorable court rulings, but will comply with judicial orders. The White House accused judges of usurping executive power in its latest broadside against federal courts, whose rulings have gone against President Trump's administration. Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt alleged that there had been a concerted effort by the far left to pick judges who were clearly acting as partisan activists to deal with cases involving the Republicans' actions.
President Zelensky asked for additional air defense systems to protect his civilians, particularly Patriot missile systems, and President Trump agreed to work with him to find what was available, particularly in Europe. The two leaders also agreed on a partial ceasefire against energy. Technical teams will meet in Saudi Arabia in the coming days to discuss broadening the ceasefire to the Black Sea on the way to a full ceasefire.
The U.S. judge warns that the Trump administration could face consequences if it violated a judge's order temporarily blocking the deportation of hundreds of Venezuelan migrants. Even the judge gave the government more time to elaborate on the expulsions. Washington-based U.S. District Judge James Boasberg said that the administration could choose to invoke the state secrets doctrine, which protects sensitive national security information from being disclosed in civil litigation, and explained why it was doing so rather than provide details on deportation flights. Caracas residents signed a petition launched by Venezuelan government calling for the release of 238 compatriots. The United States sent a notoriously harsh prison in El Salvador accused of being gang members in a proclamation published on March 15th. U.S. President Donald Trump invoked the 1798 Alien Enemies Act to swiftly deport what the White House says were the members of the Venezuelan gang Tren de Aragua. The Trump administration used the authority to deport 137 Venezuelans to El Salvador on Saturday, even as a judge ordered the removals halted, sparking a legal standoff. You're watching DD Indian News Hour. We're heading for a short break, but after the break, U.S. continues its strikes on Houthi strongholds in Yemen. Trump vows to annihilate Houthis completely. Dark energy, the mysterious cosmic force appears to be weakening. Pope Francis' condition improves, no longer needs ventilation.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked, we just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Always welcoming. The vibe of Punjab is larger than life. Warm up to grandeur that's beyond compare. And history that's dotted with tales of bravery. Smiling soul of India, where music, art, cuisine and culture comes together to create an unforgettable impression. Punjab is all set to win your hearts with its unique and colorful extravaganza.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. US President Donald Trump said on Wednesday that Iran must immediately stop sending military supplies to the Houthis and let the Yemeni group fight it out themselves. In a post on Truth Social, Trump added that US strikes on the Houthis will get progressively worse and that they will be completely annihilated. The United States struck targets in the Yemeni capital of Sana'a on Wednesday, the latest in a wave of strikes carried out in retaliation for attacks by the Houthis on shipping in the Red Sea. Thousands of protesters took to the streets of Istanbul on Thursday following the arrest of city's mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. Also, the opposition figure is seen as a key rival to President Recep Tayyip Erdogan. Hundreds chanted anti-government slogans with police using pepper spray to disperse protesters when they tried to push their way through a police formation. Several roads had been closed, some social media platforms were restricted, and a 4-day demonstration ban was put into place in an attempt to thwart the protests. However, despite the ban, many gathered outside Istanbul's police headquarters, the city hall, and outside the headquarters of İmamoğlu's Republican People's Party. Turkey seized the construction company co-owned by detained Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu. In a statement late on Wednesday, the prosecutor's office said control of İmamoğlu construction, trade and industry was taken over by a criminal court of peace based on financial crime investigation reports. Meanwhile, EU chief Ursula von der Leyen said on Wednesday that the detention of Istanbul Mayor Ekrem İmamoğlu was deeply concerning.
The arrest of the mayor is deeply concerning. As a Council of Europe member that Turkey is and an EU candidate country, Turkey must uphold.
We'll get you that soundbite in a while, but from here we'll take you live to the 10th India, Latin America and Caribbean Conclave. External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is speaking at the forum.
Ambassadors, business delegates, friends. It is a great pleasure to address the 10th CII-LAC conclave this morning. This gathering has developed steadily over the last decade and has now become a regular fixture in our bilateral dialogue and in our economic interactions. Its significance can be gauged from the presence today of senior leaders from, I believe, 15 nations of Latin America and the Caribbean. And as in the past, I'm confident that their visit, along with the official and business delegations accompanying them, will be productive and will contribute to the further deepening of our relationship. Before we look at the potential of India-Latin America-Caribbean cooperation, a few words about the global economic scenario would be in order. The fact is that we are passing through an uncertain and volatile period where the accumulated stresses of the past and the impending challenges of the future make a very potent combination. We are all developing countries and therefore among those most impacted by the long-term consequences of the COVID pandemic. Indeed, the catastrophic impact of that event is hard to overstate. It has set back realization of SDG targets very considerably. On top of that, the implications of the Ukraine conflict for food, fuel and fertilizer security have been additional stress points. Even otherwise, the global economy was witnessing pressures of unviable debt, deteriorating terms of trade and hard currency shortages. The cost of borrowing, particularly for developing countries, has been exorbitant. This challenging backdrop is the reality that we must recognize as we explore new forms of cooperation. The economic lessons from these happenings are also something that we need to take into account. Clearly, there is a need to de-risk the global economy from the dangers of over-concentration in any single geography. But we also need to build reliable and resilient supply chains. At the same time, because we have now moved decisively, irrevocably into the digital era, we need to ensure trust and transparency when it comes to selection of partners. Where India's collaboration with Latin America and the Caribbean are concerned, there are some areas of special priority as a result. First and foremost, our partnership must address the needs of health security. India is a major player when it comes to pharmaceuticals and vaccines. We are today prepared to not only export competitively, but also localize production where necessary. Many countries in the region already have positive experiences of our vaccines, of our life-saving drugs, of APIs and of medical devices. We have also developed the concept of Jan Aushadhi Kendras, which is like a people's pharmacy, that increase accessibility and affordability of medicines. Many of us have a well-established heritage of traditional medicine, facilitating technology flows, harmonizing regulations, recognizing pharmacopoeia, and promoting mobility of talent are among the possibilities that we should encourage. Now, both COVID and conflict have brought home to us the importance of food security. Disputes in faraway places have actually exacerbated hunger in many homes. And like during the COVID times, we saw little concern on the part of those better off about those who were not. Supply chains have also been impacted by threats to maritime shipping, accidents, or even extreme climate events. Since this involves such basic needs of society, the world is ideally looking for self-sufficiency. But if not, at least for close and reliable shoring. Latin America and the Caribbean are regions blessed by nature. They have the ability to serve as a breadbasket, not just for themselves, but for the entire world. But to realize their full potential, there is need for better technology, for greater productivity, for logistics, for post-harvest storage, and for more food processing. Advancements like drones, nano-fertilizers, and AI applications can make a big difference. These are some of the prospects that we need to explore collaboratively. The quest for energy security ranks only next to health and food security. LAC is a prolific producer of energy whose real capabilities are only now beginning to be visible. India, on its part, will actually be accounting for the largest share of new energy demands in the foreseeable future. So tying up as a reliable supplier to the fifth largest economy, probably the third by the end of the decade, makes eminent sense. Modern day transportation ensures that no source of supply is too far. Our shared interests extend beyond orthodox fossil fuels to biofuels and to renewables. Initiatives like the International Solar Alliance or the Global Biofuel Alliance are noteworthy in that context. Let me also add that energy cooperation can be a two-way street. Indian companies are active in power transmission. We can also contribute to strengthening the renewable sector and perhaps even the civilian nuclear one in the future. So, ladies and gentlemen, India is today in many ways a pioneer of digital public infrastructure. In the last decade, we have veritably seen a transformation in the quality of governance and the efficiency of services delivery as a result. This has not only dramatically reduced leakages, but enabled limited resources to be deployed across a much vaster societal expanse. It has always been our approach to share experiences and capabilities, especially with our fraternal countries of the global south. We would be open to engaging in collaborative endeavors in the digital domain so that its benefits can also be availed of in Latin America and the Caribbean. Mining has long been a core economic activity in Latin America. Many Indian companies have established themselves in this area through their investments and other activities. They range from aluminium and copper to precious metals. In recent years, there is also interest in lithium resources and other minerals relevant to semiconductors and electric mobility. Logistics is a natural corollary to any economic activity. Those of you who would have visited India before this particular occasion need no convincing of our progress in infrastructure. For those here for the first time, do appreciate that we are currently building about 10,000 kilometers of highway and 4,000 kilometers of railway annually. Our airports have doubled in the last decade, while our metro systems have more than tripled in that period. Whether it is power grids or water pipelines, Indian companies have developed formidable capacities that they can now deploy abroad. We can be your reliable partner in all these domains. In recent years, India has also emerged as an increasingly competitive defense exporter. We have by now a track record of supply of radars, helicopters, maritime surveillance aircraft, offshore patrol vessels, artillery and ammunition. Our products are sturdy and easy to maintain. In many ways, we can meet the requirements that emanate from your particular environment. Like Latin America and the Caribbean, India is also rapidly becoming a middle-class society. Quite often, aspirations and lifestyles move ahead of actual incomes. But what it does in multiple domains is to position India as a competitive source for the consumption demands of that economic group. From small cars to two-wheelers, from pharmaceuticals to smartphones, we can today really compete with the best of the world. There is a growing complementarity between our economies that the political leadership can help accelerate and consolidate. Our bilateral trade today has reached the annual range of about $35 to $40 billion annually. These numbers have a real potential of increasing if we make sustained efforts. Stronger cooperation between policymakers and business community will surely yield results. The investment story has also begun to take off in both directions. Here too, there is cause for greater optimism. Let me add two other factors because they both characterize our current, I would say, development and initiatives in this country, as well as reflect the priorities of my own ministry. One pertains to the startup and innovation culture. I think if the visiting ministers and business people spend a little time, this is probably the biggest change which has occurred in the last few years. And you can actually feel the startup energy in this country. It is again, I think, an area that we need to explore more actively with our international partners. The second refers to projects that we undertake. I think there was a reference both by Mr. Banerjee and Mr. Mukundan to that. India today has roughly about 80 development partners, 80 countries with whom we work on projects. And we have delivered more than 600 significant projects across the world. Many of them are in Latin America and Caribbean. I've had the privilege of visiting some of them myself. Some of them are big. They are infrastructure projects, roads, for example, or power grids. Some of them may be much smaller. They may be community projects. But I again want to highlight that as an area of cooperation, something that we would like to take forward. We are actually, I think, even during this conclave, advancing it with some of our partner countries. So let me conclude by saying this, that last year while visiting the LAC region, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the development of a portal, partnerindia.org. It would focus on the 5 T's: trade, technology, tourism, talent and tradition. Once developed and boarded, it would be the port of first call for those who are keen to engage with each other. We expect this portal to materialize by the end of the year, and hopefully it would contribute to making this conclave an even smarter deliberation. So again, I want to say we appreciate very much the presence of all the visiting leaders, of their delegations. I would particularly like to acknowledge and appreciate the efforts of Team CII and Team MEA. As we now move into the second decade of the India-LAC conclave, I'm confident that this would emerge as a key platform to energize a partnership that is increasingly productive and consequential. I thank you for your attention.
Dr. S. Jaishankar there speaking at the 10th India, Latin America and Caribbean Conclave. He was speaking on the session which had the theme of advancing economic alliances for collaborative growth. The minister talked of the participating countries, that as developing countries, these countries, the participating countries, face the maximum impact of COVID pandemic, and the implications of Ukraine conflict have also been faced more by these countries. He also talked of the need to ensure transparency in selection of partners. He also talked of the priority areas. The first priority area was health. As he mentioned, he said that India has made an impact in the sector through vaccines, also through export of, through helping the other nations with medicines, and also the Jan Aushadhi Kendras domestically. He also talked of COVID and the conflict have highlighted the concerns for food security. This was the second priority. The world is looking for self-sufficiency in these times, and the quest of energy security was the third point which he highlighted. He said that LSE is a prolific producer of energy. India is accounting for largest energy demands in the next few years, and he also pointed to the energy cooperation between India and LSE countries. He also talked of the changes in quality of governance in India through digitalization. He also talked of how bilateral trade has reached more than $45 billion annually. And he also pointed to the 5 T's that would strengthen the relation better. This was a gist of what the minister said at the forum. In the bulletin that follows, we will get you more on that. But meanwhile, DD India correspondent Ajay Mishra spoke to Jay Shroff, Chairman and Group CEO of UPL Limited, on prospects and future sector collaborations between India and the Latin American nations. Let's listen in.
As far as the LAC is concerned, what are the sectors that are promising for Indian economy?
So UPL is one of the largest companies in Latin America from India. Today UPL and its associates have almost a $5 billion business, and Latin America is a very important region. Also, Latin America is very important for food production. If you look at Brazil, Argentina, Chile, and all these countries, they are very food production worldwide. These are some of the centers, and UPL is very involved in agriculture. I think pharmaceutical industry will have fantastic growth. I think automobile, whenever I'm traveling, I see some of the local automobile companies also presence there. I think it's a land of opportunity. Central America, Latin America is an amazing market. People there really like India. They want to grow the business. The governments want to grow business with India.
From the point of view of food security, because there are some products that are being produced in Latin American countries which we import, like lentils and on. So how important is that, and how can we benefit from the agrarian economy in LAC?
So I think India is a very large country with 1.4 billion people. Whenever there is a weather issue here or some kind of crop issue, there is a shortage. We can build a strong partnership with Latin America to supply us key products like edible oil, like pulses. I think it's very important to have that, because we are feeding 1.4 billion people every day. If there's a little bit of a shortage, it can cause a lot of problem.
So product diversification as well as market diversification is what India is looking for, and LAC is the next big target. With camera person Kumar Datta, Ajay Mishra, DD India, New Delhi.
Slovakia says that India, as the voice of Global South, is an important stakeholder in Ukraine peace. Visiting Slovakian Foreign Minister Juraj Blanar spoke exclusively to DD India correspondent Ramesh Ramachandran in New Delhi. We'll get you more.
Finally, everyone understands that this peace should be guaranteed from the superpowers, and also from the European Union, and also some countries like Global South. This will be contributing to be achieved a long-lasting peace for a future.
Talking about the Global South, Mr. Minister, do you see a scope for India, for instance, to actually play a role in resolving this conflict?
Yeah, sure. India is also a very important stakeholder. We can guarantee some security.
Slovakia acknowledges that closer Russia-China relations is an unintended consequence of the Ukraine conflict.
We understand that they have historical ties, China and Russia, and one of the results of the Ukraine conflict that their cooperation are even closer than before.
Right.
That we wanted to achieve, I think not. And I think that this is very important also to have peace in this Taiwan Strait and not to escalate the situation.
You can watch this entire interview at 8:30 p.m. or 1500 GMT on Thursday. Up next, we're heading for a short break. Stay with us. You're watching DD India News Hour.
Geopolitics and trade deals. Economic challenges amid development. Hard work and the path to prosperity. It's the economy always. Between walkers, money is what money does and says. Supply creates its own demand. Between the bulls pulls and bears tears. When supply chains globalization and India rises to the podium. We'll get you centered with the economic brief at 8 p.m. every Thursday on DD India.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. The leader of Romania's second largest party, George Simeon, became the hard right's candidate in a May presidential election rerun after an ally withdrew from the race on Wednesday. Simeon, leader of the Hard Right Alliance for Uniting Romanians and Anna Maria Gavrila, the leader of the Young People Party, joined the race with the agreement that one would stand down if election authorities approved both of their candidacies. Gavrila withdrew on Wednesday. The European Union and NATO member will repeat its two-round presidential election on May 4th and 18th after the Constitutional Court voided the initial ballot in December following accusations of Russian meddling in favor of far-right, pro-Russian frontrunner Kalin Georgescu. Georgescu, in fact, denied accusations of Russian meddling and was barred from running again earlier this month. He stopped short of endorsing a single candidate after his bid was rejected. Indonesia's parliament passed contentious revisions to the country's military law, which will allocate more civilian posts for military officers, and street protests against the changes are expected to take place. The revisions have been criticized by civil society groups who say that it could take the world's third biggest democracy back to the draconian New Order era of former strongman President Suharto, when military officers dominated civilian affairs. President Prabowo Subianto, who took office last October and was Special Force Commander under Suharto, has been expanding the armed forces' role into what were considered civilian areas. The government has said that the bill requires officers to resign from the military before assuming civilian posts at departments such as the Attorney General's office, and a lawmaker has said that officers could not join state-owned companies to counter concerns the military would be involved in business. Haitians in the capital city of Port-au-Prince protested against the prolonged insecurity as gangs have taken over large swaths of the city and forced many to be displaced. Protesters, including displaced Haitians, set up barricades in the streets, demanding urgent measures to combat insecurity and the resignation of the Transitional President Council's members. At least 2 people were injured during the protest. The Viv and Sam gang alliance has been escalating attacks since government security forces this month began attacking gang enclaves with explosive-packed drones. People in North Macedonia's Kokani attended a vigil at the local church on Wednesday to remember the many victims of a fire in a nightclub at the weekend and pray for the health of the survivors and relatives. Trees and other surfaces near the church were covered in death notices for the victims on Wednesday, attracting attention from passers-by in the small town of around 25,000 residents. The 59 people killed had been attending a hip-hop concert when the fire broke out in the early hours on Sunday at a nightclub. Officials said the nightclub's license was illegally obtained and that the venue lacked fire extinguishers and emergency exits. More than 150 people were injured. A jury in North Dakota has found Greenpeace liable for hundreds of millions of dollars in damages in a case brought by a U.S. pipeline operator that accused the group of orchestrating a campaign of violence and defamation. Greenpeace must pay a Texas-based pipeline company nearly $667 million in damages for the environmental advocacy group's role in 2016-2017 protests against the Dakota Access Pipeline in North Dakota. The verdict included damages for defamation, trespassing and conspiracy. The jury awarded more than $400 million in punitive damages, which are intended to punish defendants for their conduct. Greenpeace denied wrongdoing and called the case an attack on free speech rights. The group's lawyers said that they would appeal against the verdict. Construction of the pipelines was met with fierce protests by environmental and tribal advocacy groups who said the project would poison local water supply and exacerbate climate change. The project began in 2016 and was completed the following year. The pipeline transports roughly 40% of the oil produced in North Dakota's Bakken region. The U.S. government-funded Radio Free Asia told hundreds of staff members that they will be put on unpaid leave from the end of this week after President Trump's administration said that it was terminating the outlet's funding. The Trump administration announced on Saturday that it was terminating the federal grants that sustain the operations of RFA and Radio Free Europe, Radio Liberty, and that more than 1,300 Voice of America employees were placed on leave in a likely fatal blow to the government-funded outlets. RFA has broadcast across Asia since 1996. Rights activists say that multilingual reporters serve as a rare source of reliable news in authoritarian countries. raising awareness about the plight of oppressed minorities. The cuts are part of an unprecedented push by Trump and billionaire Elon Musk to shrink the federal government, which they say wastes U.S. taxpayers' money on causes that do not line up with U.S. interests. Pope Francis has suspended the use of an oxygen mask as the clinical condition of the pontiff was improving after more than 1 month in hospital. The Vatican said on Wednesday that the Pope is no longer using mechanical ventilation for breathing at night, and his doctors believe that he will continue to improve. The Vatican press office said that Pope Francis' pneumonia has not been eliminated but was under control. Pope Francis has been in Rome's Gemelli Hospital since February 14th, suffering from pneumonia in both lungs, but the Vatican has reported recent progress after earlier worries that his life could be at risk. The Vatican released the first image of Francis in hospital on Sunday, showing him praying in a chapel. Finland once again tops the World Happiness Report, which was released on Thursday. People in 143 countries and territories are asked to evaluate their life on a scale from 0 to 10, with 10 representing their best possible life. Results from the past 3 years are averaged to create a ranking. Finland remained in the top spot for an 8th year with an average score of 7.75, followed by Denmark, Iceland and Sweden. The US fell to 24th place, its lowest ever level in the global ranking, while Afghanistan held the bottom spot with a score of 1.36.
In this report, we have Finland again at the very top, and the average life satisfaction in Finland is around 7.75. As people self-report the way their lives are going, that's the very top. So the other Nordic countries follow closely behind Finland, with Denmark and Sweden and Iceland. At the very bottom of the World Happiness Report, we have Afghanistan falling even lower with an average life satisfaction in the country with now 1.3 out of 10 in the way that people self-rate the way their lives are going.
The London Original Print Fair, the British capital's longest-running art fair, celebrates its 40th anniversary this week with an array of works spanning from old masters to contemporary creations. Running March 20th to 23rd, this year's edition features more than 40 studios, dealers and publishers with displayed works. The fair, which was launched in June 1985 with 16 exhibitors, has long offered fans the chance to view and buy prints considered more affordable than paintings and sculptures. Works from around the world are featured, including those showcasing as part of India Printmaker House, a platform artist Shivangi Ladha founded for young printmakers. Vietnam's airports, seaports and border gates will implement biometric technology and VNL by end year, following the directive from the Prime Minister. Now, this initiative aims to streamline administrative procedures and transform government services from a request-based to a service-providing approach. The government plans to simplify more than 320 administrative procedures through the digitization of personal data on electronic ID accounts, with completion expected in the second quarter of 2025. Local authorities are also expected to digitize household registration data and explore a way to reuse this data to simplify procedures. The mysterious and invisible cosmic force known as the dark energy has deteriorated over time rather than remaining constant. According to the new data, if dark energy is in fact weakening, it would likely mean that science's understanding of how the universe works will need to be rewritten. The new findings come from the Dark Energy Spectroscopic Instrument, which sits on a telescope at the Kitt Peak National Observatory in the U.S. state of Arizona. The findings announced on Wednesday are part of a years-long study of the history of the cosmos, focusing upon dark energy. Now, this analysis, combined with other astrophysical data, offers mounting evidence that the impact of dark energy may be weakening over time and that the standard model of how the universe works may need to be revised, the researchers said. In Peru, intense rainfall on Monday had swollen a river, flooding a small town with the Lake Titicaca watershed in southern region. The deluge has forced residents to evacuate their homes and has left children unable to attend school. The Ramas River overflowed earlier this week following heavy rains in Salmon, located in the southern Puno region near Lake Titicaca. The surging waters inundated nearby areas, causing significant damage to crops, roads, homes and a primary school. Peru's National Meteorological Service, CII, reported on Tuesday that the heavy rains have increased water levels in the rivers feeding to Lake Titicaca, including the Ramis. By Wednesday, the Ramis River's flow has reached 504.18 cubic meters per second. CII forecasts that rains will intensify over the weekend, which is likely further to impact the river volumes within the Titicaca watershed. The Canadian Pacific, a 1940 steam train that took soldiers and supplies to England's south coast during World War II, returned to service on Wednesday, taking on board volunteers who spent 14 years reconditioning it and relatives of those who built it. The Canadian Pacific set off from the market town of Alresford in southeast England for an inaugural journey to nearby Alton, marking a completion of the restoration project that began in 2011. The train was named after the Canadian Pacific shipping lines that crossed the Atlantic during the war to deliver military and civilian supplies to Britain. Many such vessels were destroyed or damaged by the Nazis. After World War II, the train was used for regular passenger services to and from the coast, often for holidaymakers. It was last taken out of service in 2008 and is now due to be revived for tourist trips to Heritage Watercress Line. You're watching DD India News. We're waiting for a short break. Stay with us.
Complex issues, hidden agendas, twists and turns, strategic games. We think all dots are linked. We just need to connect them. Join me every week as I connect the dots to unravel hidden designs in statecraft, mysteries, and decode issues that matter to you. Watch Connecting the Dots with me at these times on DD India.
Welcome back after the break. You're watching DD India News Hour. Let's get to updates from the world of business now. The Federal Reserve kept its benchmark interest rate unchanged on Wednesday and signaled that it still expects to cut rates twice this year. The US Federal Reserve maintained its policy rate between 4.25% and 4.5%. Federal Reserve officials maintained their projection of 2 interest rate reductions in 2025, while revising their growth estimates downwards for 2025 and increasing their inflation predictions following the Trump administration's implementation of the tariffs. The U.S. Central Bank officials suggested that they continue to expect a reduction in borrowing costs by 50 basis points before the end of the year, considering the anticipated economic slowdown and eventual decline in inflation rates. Additionally, they reduced the U.S. GDP growth forecast for the current year from 2.1% to 1.7%, alongside predictions of a marginally higher unemployment rate by the end of this year. U.S. President Donald Trump said that the Federal Reserve would be better off cutting rates as U.S. tariffs start to ease their way into the economy. U.S. Fed Chief Jerome Powell said that the economic activity was looking strong, but the surveys conducted by the central bank showed weak sentiments, partly because of the tariffs. He also said that the forecasts have considered the tariff retaliation by other countries on the U.S.
Let me say that it is going to be very difficult to have a precise assessment of how much of inflation is coming from tariffs and from other, and that's already the case. You may have seen that goods inflation moved up pretty significantly in the first 2 months of the year. Trying to track that back to actual tariff increases, given what was tariffed and what was not, very, very challenging. So some of it, the answer is clearly some of it. A good part of it is coming from tariffs, but we'll be working, and so will other forecasters, to try to find the best possible way to separate non-tariff inflation from tariff inflation.
Stocks were higher on Wednesday after the Federal Reserve left interest rates unchanged in its latest policy announcement and maintained its forecast for lower rates later in 2025. Gold flipped positive, touching a record high, and U.S. Treasury yields paired gains. All the 3 major U.S. indices gained upward momentum after the announcement. The Dow Jones rose 383.32 points, the S&P gained 60.63 points, and the Nasdaq rose 246.67 points. European stocks closed higher, notching their fourth consecutive session of gains. US Treasury yields pared their earlier advances after policymakers indicated that they anticipate the Fed funds target rate will be reduced by 50 basis points this year. Google was hit with 2 charges of breaching landmark EU rules on Wednesday, while Apple was ordered to help rivals connect with its iPhones and iPads as Europe's antitrust regulators continued a crackdown against the big tech. The move by European Commission came despite threats from US President Donald Trump to levy tariffs against countries which impose fines on US companies. The EU competition watchdog issued preliminary findings, changing Google with DMA violations in both the areas. The Google case centered on whether it restricts app developers from informing users about the offers outside its app store, Google Play, and whether it favors its associated search services such as Google Flights in Google Search. The Commission also issued 2 orders to Apple to open up its ecosystem to rivals 6 months after it began so-called specification proceedings against the iPhone maker. The first charge in the Google case focused on the company's practices on its app store, Google Play. In the second charge, regulators said that Google fared its own services such as Google Shopping, Google Hotels and Google Flights over the rivals. The company, which has been fined more than $8.7 billion by EU in the last decades for various antitrust violations, risks fines of up to 10% of its global annual sales if found guilty of breaching the DMA. Argentina's Congress gives President Javier Milei the green light to reach a new loan agreement with the International Monetary Fund. Argentina's lower house on Wednesday approved a potential new deal between the country and the International Monetary Fund. The vote was passed with 129 lawmakers in favor, 108 against, with 6 abstaining. The approval allows Milei to seal an agreement that would bring tranquility to the markets and would allow Argentina, which is currently paying a debt of $44,000 million to the organization, to move forward in the liberalization of the capital market. Finding itself in a clear minority in Congress, the government decided to defy Argentine law and approved the agreement by decree. As it was ratified by the Chamber of Deputies, it does not need to be debated in the Senate. After business, we now turn focus to sports. The second edition of the Khelo India Para Games is set to begin in the national capital on Thursday. These games will be held in 6 disciplines, including para-athletics, para-archery and para-badminton. The opening ceremony will be held at the Indira Gandhi Stadium on Thursday evening in the presence of over 1,300 athletes and 350 support staff. The tournament will be streamed on the YouTube page of Prasar Bharati Sports and will also be available on live broadcast on Doordarshan channels. 2-time Olympic medalist PV Sindhu suffered an early exit from the women's singles event at the Swiss Open 2025. Former world champion Sindhu succumbed to world number 31 Julie Jacobsen in a contest that lasted 61 minutes. The defeat marks the Indian star shuttler's 3rd consecutive first-round exit of the year. Meanwhile, India's women's doubles pair of Gayatri Gopichand and Teresa Jolie advanced to the 2nd round of the badminton tournament. The Indian duo comfortably defeated Eileen Müller and Kelly Van Buiten to move to the next round, where they will face Germany's Celine Hupps and also Emily Lehmann. New Zealand runner Sam Root scripted history by becoming the first 15-year-old to break the 4-minute barrier in the mile. Ruth completed the run in 3 minutes and 58.35 seconds at Mount Smart Stadium in Auckland, surpassing the previous record by 2 seconds. He achieved the milestone just 24 days before his 16th birthday, with pacemakers Sam Tanner and Ben Wall also finishing under 4 minutes. Norway's Jacob Ingebrigtsen was previously the youngest to shatter the 4-minute barrier when he ran 3 minutes and 58.07 seconds as a 16-year-old. World's most famous cycling race is set to return to Britain for the 5th time as Edinburgh hosts the Tour de France Grand Depart in 2027. This will be the 3rd instance where the race has started in Britain after London in 2007 and Leeds in 2014. Further details are yet to be announced. However, organisers have confirmed that the tour's first 3 stages will take place in Scotland, England and Wales. Last year's Tour de Depart took place in Florence, Italy, with the 2026 race scheduled to start in Barcelona, Spain. In tennis, Australia's Nick Kyrgios and Emma Raducanu have advanced to the second round of Miami Open. Nick Kyrgios defeated Mackenzie McDonald in the first round of the Miami Open on Wednesday to earn his first win since October 2022. Kyrgios will next take on Russian Karen Khachanov in the second round of the tournament on Friday. On the other hand, former US Open champion Emma Raducanu brushed against Japanese Sayaka Ishii 6-2, 6-1 to reach the second round. Raducanu, who was ousted in the first round at Indian Wells, has regained her footing against Ishii. Next, Raducanu will face world number 10 Emma Navarro, who won a WTA 500 event in early March. In soccer, Team India secured a dominant 3-0 win over Maldives in a FIFA international friendly match at Jawaharlal Nehru Stadium in Shillong on Wednesday. The Blue Tigers led 1-0 at halftime. Seasoned defender Rahul Bheke and player of the match Liston Kalako scored the first 2 goals for India. The biggest highlight of the game came in the 76th minute when Sunil Chhetri scored his 95th international goal. Chhetri netted the ball with a swift header to announce his return to international football. The win ended a 15-month international victory drought for Blue Tigers, who will now play Bangladesh in the AFC Asian Cup 2027 qualifiers on March 25th. That's it in this edition of DD India News Hour, but let us know your thoughts on the news of the day. For those of you on the go, you can get all the latest news and updates from India and across the world on the DD India mobile app. This app is available on both Android and iOS platforms, and you can download the respective QR codes. We'll be back with more news as it breaks here on DD India. I'm Preeti Kaur signing off, and from all of us here in Delhi, thanks for watching DD India News Hour.